Hey guys, Joe here, and today we're talking about that, not the system. I've already done that. What we're going to be talking about are the two graphics cards you see in there. And yes, of course, as you can see, if you saw it on my Twitter, and you should go join Twitter, just so you can see that, I actually leveled out the bottom pipe there, so now it sits at the correct angle. So that's good. And then immediately I decided to take the 980 out and start screwing with other graphics cards. It's actually the main reason why I prefer this case and any other open frame case like it, is because I can very easily swap stuff out. I can leave cables loose so I can add extra video cards, remove things, add things, do whatever the hell I want. And it actually looks good when it's modified. The point of today's video. Today's video is talking about those two graphics cards that are in there, and those are NVIDIA GTS 240's. They're actually NVIDIA, they're not EVGA or MSI or anything like that, because they are made specifically for OEM computers, Dell, HP, and the like from the days, probably Gateway back then too. They're actually a cut down version of a GTS 250 in that it has a few less shader units or CUDA cores, and it runs slightly slower. Now these particular cards, they were released in July of 2009, and they have 112 CUDA cores, 675 core clock, and a 1100 megahertz memory clock, which is an effective 2200 megahertz. It is a 120 watt draw card, and it's suggested to have a 450 watt power supply just to run them. Or it, in the case of a single card, which was actually pretty damn surprising. One thing I forgot to mention is that these do require a 6-pin power connector, because they do use more than 75 total watts of power. The PCIe lanes can provide up to 75 watts. That's why a 1030 or a 750 or even a entry-level 1050 or 460 can run without a power connector, but these cards require 120, so the 6-pin power connector is necessary. Now these have 1 gigabyte of GDDR3 RAM, as well as a 55 nanometer process, and the code name for the processors themselves are G92B, because they're not the full-fledged units that are in the GTS 250s. Now we start talking about what happens when you're looking at a 9-year-old graphics card. The newest DirectX that these cards support is DirectX 10, which actually was pretty surprising. I thought it would be DirectX 9, but it was DirectX 10. And I looked up some comparisons because I don't have a similarly aged ATI or Radeon card. And the closest competitor to this card at the time was the Radeon HD 4830, which was available with the same amount of memory. So at the time, they were both pretty similar cards. So why do I have the cards? Well, I went and picked up a GTX 760 superclock from a guy. And while I was there, he was showing me some of the systems that he was currently decommissioning, and he offered me these cards for free. And I was like, why would I want these old junky looking NVIDIA branded cards? I think they actually are branded GeForce, so they're a little bit better than just the base. But I was like, okay, fine, since they're free, I'll take them. And I hooked them up, and they both work. However, if you take a look at this picture, which I originally put on Twitter, you'll see that yeah, they barely worked. One of the cards actually had to have a fan attached to it using rubber bands, as shown in the video here, because it was missing one fan, and the other fan, when I took it apart, was so full of dust bunnies it couldn't push any air through. So they were both running super hot. They run hot anyways. They can run up to 102 degrees Celsius. But after cleaning them, reapplying thermal paste, and fixing the thermal pads that looked like bubble gum, it now runs in the high 60s, low 70s under load, which is tolerable for an old OEM card like this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you some gameplay from the camera off the screen, just because it seems to be easier and it seems to give me the best performance. So as you can see in MSI Afterburner here, it is currently clocked at 800 megahertz and 1200 on the memory. I was able to get 125 on the core and 100 on the memory. However, it's always running at full speed regardless of what you do. And that's okay, I guess. The fan curve is set at 73% right now in order to keep it at 47 degrees. That's kind of insane. So one of the things that I find funny is I've reinstalled the driver for this graphics card, or these graphics cards, 3 times, and it took forever to get it to actually operate in SLI. But the only way I could get it to operate in SLI is to run Wickle driver 341.74. 342.01 is actually the latest that is supported by these cards, yet in SLI it only recognizes it if it's at 341.74. Pain in the ass, but it does work when it works. So let's go ahead and open up some benchmarks. As you can see, this is Unigine Valley benchmark, basic edition. The only one that I have paid for is Super Precision benchmark and 3D Mark on Steam. And this is a good benchmark for older cards because it allows you to test them. I know that's a dumb statement, but in fact, Superposition benchmark won't even run the GTS 240's because they don't support DirectX 11, even though it says DirectX 11 up here in the corner. But as you can see, it's actually running pretty smooth, which I'm happy with. I was actually very surprised. I expected this to be a stuttery mess, being that it's only got 1 GB of DDR3 RAM on board of these cards. However, under benchmarking, it seems to run pretty smooth. I've seen it go as high as 80 FPS. I've seen it go as low as 14. And we'll just let it run through, and we'll see what the score comes back on the SLI. I will say that in single card performance, it was at 1,202. So here we go. The benchmark is done. It scored 46.8 FPS and a score of 1958. In the original test, it was only running at 28.4 FPS, so it's damn near an 85% scaling. However, I did notice a couple of artifacting in the test, but it didn't crash it or cause any problems, so I'm happy there. I think next we'll go into some games. Now, one thing that was interesting, and I want to see if it's going to happen again, is the first time I tried running this in SLI, Grand Theft Auto 5, it doesn't actually use SLI. And I was confused because I recorded the numbers the first time when I was using just a single card, and when I added the second card, I noticed that the frames actually didn't go up, even though the memory identified did. So yeah, that's really weird. One thing I've noticed here is that having this completely open definitely helps when it comes to cooling. I've done this test before. I actually did this video before when this was all in my Fractal design case, and these cards were running probably 7 to 10 degrees hotter than they are currently. So I'm happy with where they're currently sitting. Okay, so here we are. We're in Franklin's house. Game's over. I'm a billionaire. I'm also a cheater. Painkiller, by the way. If you hit tab or tilde and type in painkiller, that's your invulnerability cheat. But let me zoom in on something. This is why I know SLI isn't working, because the bottom card is only at 48 degrees. Even though it's at 800 megahertz, it's not actually doing anything. So this game is running off of one card right now, and possibly the second GPU is only doing some PhysX. And here's the other reason why I think that problem is happening. Let me move somewhere where you can see this. It thinks it's in DirectX 11 mode. So that could be causing a problem there where it's just not displaying right. So as you can see, it's identifying at 2 gigabytes of VRAM and saying it needs 2300 megabytes of VRAM, but it is running at 1080p, 60 hertz, one monitor, no FXAA, no VSync, no MSAA, none of that, with half setting on population variety as well as distance scaling, and everything else set to normal. So let's see what happens when you use a 9-year-old graphics card to play a game that came out 2 years after the card did. Now, you will not be getting a 60 FPS playthrough at 1080p with these graphics cards. There's just not enough VRAM to do it. However, what is impressive is that you will get a 30 FPS playthrough at 1080p, which is better than an Xbox 360, because an Xbox 360 will only do it at 720p at 30 FPS. It slows down if you're at 1080p. So as you can see, I'm doing a lot of quick movements, mainly because of my arthritis, but I'm also doing a lot of explosions and shooting a lot of things and causing some motion blur, and we're still over 30 FPS. The graphics card is running super hot, but you know, what can you do about that? That's also because I only have the fan set at 70%. Because here's what happens at 100%. If it will allow me to get out there, you should be able to hear it much more clearly how loud the fans are now. But yeah, 30 FPS, no problem. And if I jump in a car, if there's one that I haven't set on fire, there we go, we will take a look at what actually tends to cause the most slowdown in a game, and that is fast movement, such as driving a car. As you can see, this is one of the main strips in the game. It's a main shopping area near Michael's house. And 30 to 38 FPS with some slowdowns into the 20s depending on the, action on screen. But completely playable, 30 FPS, running off of one card. I wish it would run off of both cards because I think it would scale really well, as the next game will show us. Look at that, 800, 850, 880, 900. Oh, almost 1,000 FPS in the loading screen. That's impressive. So here's the performance in SLI on CS:GO at 1080p. Outside the building, we're at 115 to 140, unless you look up in the sky, of course. Once you get into the building and you start moving around, you'll see that it actually goes up, which is impressive. Hate this first level. And I hate bots. So as you can see, it'll go anywhere from 105 to 260 FPS, depending on where you are and where you're looking, 295 now. But I play on a 60 Hertz monitor that's overclocked to 75 Hertz. So as long as I get at least 75 frames per second, it's absolutely smooth for me. So even at its worst, this game is completely playable, which is nice to have, especially, again, if you're on a budget. Would I recommend you go out and ever buy this setup? Absolutely not. In fact, the SLI bridge that I'm using between the two cards, which is an MSI LED bridge, costs more than both of those cards would if you went and bought them on eBay right now. The point is, if you have no money and you just need to throw something together to get you through a day or two or a week or whatever the case may be, this could work. Let's say you're in the middle of your pay period and your graphics card goes down and you can't afford to go out and just drop $300 to $800 for a new graphics card, but you happen to have these things laying around. Well, toss them in your system and get by for a couple of weeks. Or if you're building a retro system, these would be fun to install in like an early SLI capable Pentium whatever. I'd have to do some research and see what the earliest board that would support it is. But that would be kind of cool. It would be unexpected, and it would be one of the faster Pentium systems. In today's terms, there's no point in having these cards other than the fun of it. And let's face it, that's what my channel's about. Having fun with old tech. So that's about it. If you have any questions, let me know. You can see I've been talking or filming for almost 40 minutes. So that's new for me. I'm doing a lot of extra filming and then cutting it down in the edits. That's about it. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and click over there to subscribe if you haven't. And then click around where my face head is, because that will let you see another video. And, as always, I'll talk to you later.